Hello everyone and welcome to my video about the beauty of Python. Today we're going to solve this programming question in a bunch of different ways, and with each new way that we solve it, we're going to learn how Python kind of helps us to simplify the problem and make it more concise and many times more readable. So we have this message variable that says hey there, and what we want to do is we want to write a function that returns true if there is a space in the message. So as of right now there is a space, so whatever function we write should return true as of right now. So let's start with the first one. The first one is the most intuitive way that many programmers who are coming to Python kind of solve it using. This is solving it by using the index. So in Python we would write a for I in range. We would loop for the length of the message. So as of right now our message variable looks to be 10 characters long. So this for loop would run 10 times. And we're going to write an if statement that would basically check if the current character in our message variable, using the index, if the current character is a space, then we will return true. And if we loop through this entire message without returning true, then that means that the message does not have a space in it, right? So let's return false. Again, if we loop through the entire message without returning true, without having a space in it, then return false. Let's test this function out by printing has space 1, and we will pass in the message. None of this code will run down here because I'm not calling any of these methods, and I'm also just passing inside the function, which simply just says ignore me, nothing's happening here. It's just a placeholder. So let's run it, and we get true. And if I take the space out, then we should get false, right? There we go. We got a false. By the way, guys, I'm coding on Replit.com. This is one of my favorite online editors, just because it makes it's a very simple online code editor without having too much junk inside of it. But if you want to do more complex things, it can help you out with that as well. All right, moving on. So there's our first method. Let's move on to the next one. So now we're gonna actually loop through the message instead of looping using the index. Now what this basically allows us to do is it allows us to make the for loop more verbose. Verbose basically kind of means like more wordy. So we can say for char in message. Now right off the bat, look at how much I just trimmed off of that first line. For every, and now I want you to also pay attention to the English there. For every character in the message, what are we going to do? We're going to check to see if the character is a space. And if it is a space, what are we going to do? Return true, just like before. Look at that. So it's the same exact logic, but written way more clearly. Look at the English on it. And again, if we make it through the entire for loop without returning true, we're going to return false. So again, to test this, we're going to print call to the has space 2 function. I'm kind of using the word function and method interchangeably here. It's not so important. Like, there is a difference between them, but in this video it doesn't really matter what it is. So as of right now, I want you to think about it. What should it return now? Think about it. Alright, let's run it. Alright, we still got a false, right? Because I did not have any spaces in here. Let's put the space back and let's run it again. And I think it's just taking a minute to load for some reason. Let's try it again, because it should immediately terminate. Alright, it looks like we're slowing down a little bit over here. Sorry. Alright, I didn't save the space. Okay, there we go. We got it true. Alright, moving on to the next one. So, has space 3. This is going to be a lot simpler, alright? We can actually use this in keyword in other circumstances. In this circumstance is basically saying for every character in the message, so it goes H, E, Y, space, T, so on. But we can use it in a different way. What we can say is we can actually kind of just skip to this, but in a different way. Check this out. What we can do is we can say if there is a space in the message, if space in message, then return true. Else, return false. Now we don't have to do this for loop anymore. The in keyword in this circumstance is basically like a for loop. It's basically saying for every character that's in the message, return it and then compare it against this. And if there's a space in the message, we'll return true. Let's go ahead and test it out. We're gonna print has space 3, and we're gonna pass in the message, and we get a true. Let's take the space off and run it. False. Very nice. Alright, 2 more. By the last one, I hope you are impressed if you didn't already know that you could do this kind of stuff in Python. That's my goal here. If at least one person walks away having learned something, I'll feel good about it. So we can actually trim something else off of this. Can you believe it? Okay, so what we can do is we can actually take off the else keyword. And the reason why we're able to do that is because when we use the return keyword, if we return out of the function, then basically anything else that's in the function can never happen. Alright? So I'm just kind of like pasting a bunch of code here. It's not exactly important what it's doing, but yeah, you know what? It's not important what it's doing. I'm just going to print something random in here, okay? But I don't want you to get too hung up on what's actually happening down here, because what I want you to realize is that right now the message has a space in there, and when I call this has space for function, it should immediately return true and nothing else should be printed. Alright? So let's look at it. I'm going to print the has space for function, and I'm passing in the message. Let's run it. I get true, and none of this other stuff printed out. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the space off. Now that I took the space off, this is not going to happen because there's no space in the message, and all of this stuff down here should print. Let's see. Okay, I was right. Of course I was. JK. Okay. And you'll also notice that none got printed out because this function did not return anything. But if you don't know what returns are, or if you're not too sure about what I meant by that, don't get hung up on it. Alright. So now that we know that when the return keyword is used, we immediately exit the function, what we can do is we can simplify this down to just say return false, just like that. And this is going to do the exact same thing as it did up here. Let's run it. We should get false, and there we go, false. Alright, moving on to the last method. Now this is probably the coolest one, obviously, because now I'm going to turn this into a one-line function. And now this is gonna be pretty cool because now we've brought it down to 3 lines. But if you've never done something like this before, you might be thinking like, how can I even turn this 3 lines into 1? What we can actually do is we can return the condition. I can return this thing right here. This is called the condition. I can return the condition. And the reason I'm able to do that is because when this is evaluated, what does this turn into? Well, it actually turns into a Boolean value, either true or false, right? Because when we think about it in our heads, we must always say something like, if true, then do something, right? Isn't that what we've always learned? If a given condition is true, then do something. Well, this thing right here will convert into a true value, and if it turns into a true value, it'll return true. And if it turns into a false value, it won't do anything. It'll just skip over this line and go into this and return false. And what we can do here is we can just simply return the condition. It's pretty cool. So let's run that last one. As of right now, there is no space in the message. We should get a false. Very cool. Let's run it again. And we get true.